So what is a learning disability? This question has always been a more difficult one because a learning disability is not something that you can see. It's not visible like maybe hearing or vision issues or motor issues might be, but it is a neurological brain condition that does interfere with the storage, processing, and production of information. It does affect reading, writing, speaking, spelling, math, reasoning, can also affect attention with the overlap for attention deficit, memory issues, coordination, social skills, and emotional maturity. When I talk to people about learning disabilities, I often will say a person with a learning disability has an average or above average intellectual ability. They have the actual ability, the potential to be very successful, but they're not reaching that. Their actual performance is below that. And it's because of that processing issue that may be getting in the way. And again, it has its exclusionary in the law. It is not because you have vision or hearing issues or motor issues that you have an intellectual disability, behavior issues, autism, language difficulties. You can see the other ones that you've had, a lot of absences, frequent moves. So this is actually brain-based in what's happening and not affiliated with other issues. So facts about learning disabilities. These are just some numbers that I looked up. You can see that actual learning disabilities is the highest number of students with IEPs. It's the highest category. Even though in Iowa, we have identified individuals. So in Iowa, we don't categorize students on their IEP unless a parent asks for that, which they can. But when they turn it into the actual national for money, they do have to put some type of a disability with it. 38% of those students with IEPs have a learning disability. 45%, I've seen anywhere from 30 to 50% of students with attention deficit also have a learning disability. So they have this crossover of learning and attention issues going together. And then you see these statistics going together. This is actually from the National Council of Learning Disabilities that has then gone on to say about 1 out of 16 students with have an IEP in the school system for LD and or ADHD. So they have actually blurred those together in the numbers. 1/3 of students with LD and or ADHD have repeated a grade. So you can see many students that might be falling behind because of that. And then this alarming number that 46% of work age adults are unemployed. Actually, one of my former students just visited me for this evening, and he is definitely been employed and is almost 40. So he was thankfully one of those students that is not going into this category. And then you have 1/2 of young adults with LD or ADHD that might have encountered with the justice system. We actually did some work in the prison system in Iowa for the Learning Disabilities Association, training actual inmates to tutor their other fellow inmates because there were so many people in the judicial system that might have reading or attention issues. So we need to do something about it. We need to be aware of that, catch it early, and make sure they have the tools they need to be successful in life. The question comes when Jamie asked me to do this webinar is the idea of, okay, attention issues and learning issues, the crossover, is it the chicken or the egg? Which came first? Were your learning issues first, which caused you then to have attention issues because everything was so frustrating? Or did you have the attention issues first that got in your way of your learning and caused learning issues? And I think that we just see definitely the crossover between those two categories of people. They also look at myths and misperceptions that many things people think that students with learning disabilities might be lazy, they watch too much TV, the wrong diet, and we know that these things are not the case, that this is legitimately a brain processing issue that we need to be able to provide strategies and supports for these students. Causes, there's been a lot of research recently on dyslexia and causes of dyslexia, and it's looking at the idea that runs in families. I think you see that with attention issues as well, that you may see someone else in the family that had attention issues, just like with learning disabilities or dyslexia, someone else in your family might have had these issues. It is problems that could happen during pregnancy and birth. You can see drug and alcohol use could cause that, malnutrition, prematurity, complications, And as I am a new grandma, I do know the issues of things that could happen in pregnancy. And my daughter-in-law happened to have preeclampsia, other things that you have to worry about in the process of birth. And certainly incidents after birth that could happen. The Learning Disabilities Association has done a lot of work with toxic substances of lead in paints and things that other things, the pesticides that may have some issues that could cause learning issues. But the big thing is to look at the specifics in learning disabilities. That's how the actual national label has it, as specific learning disabilities. Each individual is different and might have unique learning abilities in different areas. So I want to share these with you, and you might be thinking about areas. I know Jamie and I were talking about this ahead of time, areas that might fit you or a loved one that you may have, or someone that you might teach also. First one is dyslexia, and in Iowa, as across the nation, dyslexia has gotten a lot of awareness, certainly from the Decoding Dyslexia, from the Iowa Dyslexia Association, looking at the actual reading issue. But a dyslexia comes under a learning disability. It means that you do have significant difficulties in reading, a language-based learning disability. Looking at the sound symbol correspondence in language and having problems learning words, spelling, which goes along with it, being able to decode words, which then affects your reading comprehension and your vocabulary and your writing skills as well. Now, as teachers, we often see this, as parents. You can see slow and labored reading. You can see that the missing of words that causes you to read slower. So this is actually why I got into learning disabilities. So when I was in high school, I was working in a cadet teaching in a middle school, and one of the students spelled a word this way. It's the word yellow spelled backwards. And I'm not saying that everyone with dyslexia spells things backwards, but you may see this happening, and that's what he did. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. This boy, from all other outside aspects, seemed like he was a very capable student. The next one is dysgraphia, which has to do with writing. So it affects many areas of your writing. It could be your handwriting, but it could also be your formation of ideas, your spelling, all the different aspects. And actually writing is probably one of the most complicated areas that we ask of students to do, and adults as well. So I'm giving some examples of some two sixth grade students. These actually are students that my college students worked with. The top one, you can see, had no handwriting issues, but this is what what he wrote. I love cars. By the time I was 3, I was saying Cadillac. You think that's impressive? If you point out a car, I can say what kind it is. So you can see a boy with spelling issues, but he has pretty good sound symbol correspondence. You can see an impressive. You could still figure that out from that developmental spelling and what he was doing, or kind. He's close enough that actually a computer spell checker could find that out. Now, this is a student, another sixth grade student that did dictation, did voice to text. He had a lot more struggles. And you can imagine if this boy had to handwrite this, what it would look like. But you can see even he had some issues with various words. I take this back. He typed this. This was not, it was not speech to text. He actually typed this one. But you can see he doesn't have the association, sound symbols association like the above student did. Still missing basic sight words right here, and inconsistently. So he doesn't spell light correctly here, but he does here. You can see other basic sight words he's missed as well. So there's a third grade student I had, and you can see she was writing about a talent show and said, it went good. I was scared, but I did it. I gave people time to laugh. You can still hear her voice coming through, as you could hear the voice from the other two students you saw that earlier. And we were working on her sound symbol correspondence, so that actually word prediction software would be able to catch some of her words because she was close enough in her spelling. But you can still see basic sight words, still vowel sounds for bit versus but, even in time, not hearing the sound of I. She did have a spelling sight word list that was changed up weekly with basic sight words that she needed to know to use in her spelling, and she had needed quick access to it. not in a dictionary where she has to get to the T's or the R's. Takes kids too long to do that. But I want to make sure that she's spelling the word like what and said correctly and not incorrectly each time, and could look at this list that she highlighted and changed each week to be able to use. Now, this is a handwriting issue. So this child has issues with the words, as you can see, too close together. He's actually writing here about President Clinton and him and playing the saxophone. So he has a great voice, great ideas he wants to get across, but definitely handwriting issues. This was 4th grade for him. I did move him to cursive, and you can see by 5th grade for him, cursive made a big difference for him to see between the words. Of course, also using, technology to help as well, but not bypassing his need to write still, but definitely improvement in what he did. Visual perception, visual motor deficit, another area to look at with a learning disability. So your actual perceptual looking at things, what is seen might look a little bit different. You might see reversals on this. Trouble cutting or copying, messy papers, losing your place, eye fatigue. You might see a child rubbing their eyes, squinting with their eyes. You might see it come through in cutting. They're not able to cut on the lines to cut something out. Or if they're writing an A, you can see right here, they miss and aren't able to connect those. Now, actually, with the children I worked with, I used something called handwriting without tears, which did not have you do the ball and stick method for an A. It actually had you just do a C, come up and touch and come down. So you could bypass this problem of the visual perception. This also would include near and far point copying. So this visual tracking. Oftentimes kids, when they're copying from the board, have a very difficult time doing that. This one actually went through this website and looked at how to write some IEP goals to help with that. But in this case, maybe this boy might need to have something right next to him so he could actually copy from something close to him and not that far away, and how he might have to see it and then chunk and then write down and then try to find his place again by looking back up again. Driving is also an issue in this. Could be merging, when you merge in with cars, parallel parking, turning a corner, parking in a garage. I often think this is something I might have. It says I have hit the garage, pulling my car backwards probably 5 times. So definitely can have a problem with that. Okay, dyscalculia, tough one, because I used to say it wrong until I heard a lady just do a presentation from Learning Disabilities in America. It is like saying the letter Q there in the middle, dyscalculia. It does look at problems in math. So you might have a variety of having problems with basic understanding. First of all, your counting ability, understanding, what a number is, sequencing numbers, math facts, place value, time and money. There may be an assortment of problems you might have with having a dyscalculia. Now, oftentimes I see if you have dyslexia, you might have problems with spelling. You also might have problems with math facts, which might be more of a memory issue. You have a hard time remembering your spelling words, remembering math facts, but it could also understand that you don't understand what adding actually is, or subtraction or multiplication, but also that gets in the way of your, further development in math. This happens to be one of my students. This is a 2nd grader. This is one of his tests. You can see he had some problems here with the money and actually looking at adding up the money. His actual understanding, of math right here in number sense of creating a largest number. What does the tens place mean? What does the ones place mean? Some basic adding, but then you see again down here the number sense of what number might be 10 more or 1 more. You also see this child with some reversals as well. But you want to make sure to look at what they know and what they don't know. Now, this page showed some things he didn't know, but he got all of the word problems correct, solving the word problems. So if I read them to him, he was able to solve those, and even maybe using a calculator to help with that. So we want to see strengths, and we want to see areas that might be having difficulties as well. Okay, this is what Jamie and I were talking about, auditory processing. So you're actually hearing things, processing things, taking in Also, you might have distracting noise in the background and how to be able to, take that out and still listen and look at multiple directions, hear things correctly. This happens to be a quote of a gentleman saying, be sure and put some of those neutrons on it in a restaurant instead of croutons, of hearing things incorrectly. It makes me think of my son when he was little. He was listening to Michael Jackson for Beat It, and he'd always say it wrong in what he was trying to sing the song. Also under language processing is auditory processing issues, actually having trouble naming things. So I had quite a few students that might have this. They might be telling you about something that happened over the weekend and they can't quite think of what the exact word that would describe it. Actually is an aging process too. I think it's as myself getting older, trying to recall a word and name it and expressing your thoughts. Then there's nonverbal learning disabilities. So this idea that you have problems with all those body language things, not having to be able to read people's signs and put it together and have it all make sense. So these students often have this literal translation for everything. And I'm going to give you an example of a student that his mom, he and his mom were on vacation. And when they got to their destination, she said, now, can you text mom and let her know we're here? Meaning she wanted him to text her mom, his grandma, and let her know that they'd gotten to their destination. And he ended up texting her and saying, hey, mom, we're here. And she could not believe he took it that literally in what he was doing. So definitely nonverbal learning disabilities will cause people to have difficulties with social skills, friendships, being able to read all of those signs that people have to let you know how they're feeling and how you should react. So can a person be both gifted and LD? Definitely this can happen. Twice exceptional. So you can look at the one I like to always showcase is Albert, looking at Thomas Edison and his writing difficulties. You can see in his letter to his mom, his real difficulties with writing, but he could not remember the letters of the alphabet or math facts. The teacher said he was too stupid to learn, but yet he was the greatest inventor of all time. 1,093 inventions. I love his quote. I always use that with my students, that invention is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. Failures are an opportunity to learn, so important. The other gentleman that everyone knows is Albert Einstein. He also did not talk till the age of 4 and didn't learn to read till he was 9. You can see all of his obstacles he had and still went on to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. So this is not a picture of one of my students, but it reminded me of one of the students I had that had attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, but was also gifted. He was actually went to a grade higher in math because he was so accelerated in math, but he had real difficulties being able to just sit still. So with his accommodations of a standing desk and an ability to be able to move around, he could move around in the back of the room. He was able to still showcase all of his great abilities in math and very giftedness in math. So it moves me then to related disorders. So this is one of the things we're just dovetailing over with, and that is the idea that attention deficit definitely overlaps with many things, but in particular, learning disabilities. There's that 30 to 50% crossover that it is definitely prevalent with kids with learning disabilities and attention deficit. Certainly this issue that learning disabilities and attention deficit share the difficulties in executive functioning. This idea of about thinking about your thinking, organizing yourself, regulating yourself, looking at time management, and making sure that all those things can be in check so that you can still learn and accomplish all of your goals. Dyspraxia is another one. This looks at the idea of problems with movement and coordination, language and speech. And actually one of the gentlemen that talks about it right here from LDA America is, Harry Potter himself, talking about his difficulty with muscle control and balance and coordinated sides of his body, sensitivity to touch, things that we might have to work on with dyspraxia. And of course, memory. Memory, I think, goes across so many things, and looking at how you're going to be able to remember sight words, remember math facts, remember sight words, as well as remembering directions, remembering chunking letters and words, all things that get in the way of your learning. So then you get to the whole point of, okay, what are some supports? So I'm going to start out with relationships. Your relationships from, all those constituents that you have in your life. So how they support you, but then also as an individual with a learning or attention issue, what you can do to develop those relationships as well. Strengths and interests is the next one I think is important that we have to make sure to capitalize on, because kids with learning and attention issues get defeated so often in school, especially. They have so many other strengths and interests that we have to make sure to capitalize on. Now, I didn't showcase strengths in school, but they definitely, you want to look at all their strengths in school. These are maybe outside strengths. It could be something that you are really good at as far as a sport or an activity or an animal or drawing or music, and making sure that we are making sure the kids get to do this area. Now, the gentleman I just had at my house that I had in school was great at bow and arrow and fishing, a very outdoors young man who still uses all those for his self-confidence, his enjoyment, all of those things in life to really help him. The next one is active engagement. I feel real strongly about active engagement, that a child can be at the center of their learning and can drive that learning. So it's not just that everything's done onto them or done to them, but they're a part of that because it is their life. So I always explain to my students and my parents that this is how I see all the pieces that go together, and everybody has to take their part. So the child has to do things and they have to be aware of those things. They have to advocate for themselves. They have to know strategies for themselves. They need to understand what they're going through. School needs to understand and provide supports, teachers, counselors, everyone at school to help as well, principals, and recess people. Then you have the outside support system. So this may be medication for, in the case of attention deficit, this may be outside counseling, looking to see what the outside supports. And then family. What is the family doing to help support the child? What are they doing to help communicate with the school, understand their child, and learn and grow with their child as well? Visual goal setting and self-monitoring. I was just working with a 4-year-old a couple of weeks ago that has attention issues, and actually a family friend. And he has had some pretty serious issues at school, had been sent home for kicking the teacher. But his mom and dad both said that they have attention issues and they're concerned that he does. So this is too complicated for him, but I set up a goal setting system for him, what he was working on, and a chart system so he could see it. And then he self-monitored that. And then there was some fun thing that we did at the end. I like this one to make sure they're stopping and thinking and you're self-monitoring. Are you on task? Are you off task? Rating yourself, have the teacher rate you, and then seeing if those things match. Very important, both with learning difficulties and attention issues. This is one my college student did, and she had a rating sheet 3 times throughout her lesson. You can't just rate at the very end because then it's too late. You need to rate throughout that time, or as a parent or a family member, helping rate consistently, not just, oh, I had a big great day, but break your day up into parts so it's doable, and then being able to reflect on that. Really important that you're looking proactively and not reactively things. This has been a kind of something I've been thinking a lot about, and that is the idea of birthday parties. So, and I'm not just saying kids with attention issues. I have 2 great niece and great nephew, and have been to their birthday parties and have seen them as being very ungrateful. So my great nephew opened up a birthday gift and looked at his grandpa and said, I already have this. And so I started reading up on some things as basic as this, as a birthday party. What can you do? And it really is this idea of social stories, this idea of talking about it before it happens. And how can you, if you do open up a gift that you already have, how do you respond? How does it make people feel? And I see many teachers using these in the classrooms very successfully, where they can walk you through a social story of something that could be happening, and then how you should respond, give you some strategies before it happens. and then post that so kids would be able to know how to follow through on that. So it is teaching procedures and strategies to kids so that they understand them. This is one I used and wrote called Active Learning. It's about, I call it the laws of learning. How do you look at people who are speaking? How do you ask and answer questions? How do you get your work done? How do you set goals? And breaking these all into parts so that they could be able to understand them and know how to do them. Certainly mindfulness. This is a book I use, Breathe Like a Bear, and using breathing techniques. Don't want to forget about this big one, this collaboration with teachers. We need to make sure we're all on the same side, working together, that we are talking to one another. We're proactively letting teachers know if they should anticipate, hey, something happened this morning, or this is why the work didn't get done. And teachers collaborating with parents as well, making sure that we see each other's sides. I think homework's a big one. I think that many times my students, when they go home with their parents, would just have a battle trying to get homework done. So I did look at sometimes hiring or trying to free assistance from homework, trying to get an outside person to help them with their homework. So it was not always the parent, but also still placing an emphasis on how important homework it is, but limiting it. So it's not a whole evening fighting battle for students. And then I do believe strongly in summer school. So if there is, you are behind and significantly behind, the only way you're going to catch up is through some summer school. While other kids are not doing that and moving that learning curve forward, you need to provide those, fill those gaps in some type of summer school and try to make it as fun as it can be, and finding that right match for summer school as well. Accommodations, definitely very important that we're looking through to see how can we level that playing field so the students can have accommodations, which I see at college as well. So my college students and what we can do to level the playing field so they can also be successful. So I just want to make sure I give the plug for the Learning Disabilities Association. This also includes our office in Des Moines, our telephone number, and our actual website, email, Facebook page that you can follow us to get more answers as well.
A parent who is trying to get an IEP for their child, but the school says they're fine, but the parent doesn't feel that's the case. Is there anything that they can do?
Well, in Iowa, I'll speak for Iowa, that's what I know. You can actually request that you want your child tested. You can also request to have your child tested for a specific area you want looked at. So you could say, I want my child tested for a learning disability, or I want my child tested for their attention issues. You can actually go in. Now you can do that in writing, but definitely would go through and making sure you get to the right people. You're probably the principal. In our case, we had a support services team that you would go to as well, but you can request that, and that they would have to do an evaluation if you request it, and then they can show you the evidence that says they're doing fine. So they would have, and you should be collecting that evidence too, to say, no, they're not doing fine. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I've collected for work from school. And I want to make sure that they get those supports that they need by requesting that evaluation.
Can you speak on the types of assessments to establish the presence of a learning disability, specifically naming them? Are there preferred tests?
In Iowa, I see, they've gone away from standardized type of testings. So when I was in, teaching and amongst students, we definitely had standardized testing, whether it was the Woodcock-Johnson or different supporting tests like that. But they certainly have gotten away from that in Iowa of using those. So if they think it's a reading issue, they would do reading tests that would look at speed of reading. They would look at that and analyze your reading errors, do a miscue analysis to see what errors you're missing and why that might be happening. They would look at your comprehension, get a grade level for where you're at. And also with writing, to be able to see some writing samples to compare that to other kids in your age level. But if you request, I'll just take the Iowa City Hospitals. So if you end up going to Iowa City Hospitals, they're going to do more standardized type of testing, or if you do a private, like you and I in the psychology department, you can go for testing there. They're going to use more standardized type of testing, as well as, looking at your schoolwork and looking what you're doing on a daily basis too, not just a standardized test, but looking at multiple types of assessments to see your strengths and to see your gap areas and what those might be. Now in Iowa, you would have to specifically request that you want your child tested for a learning disability. So that may make it look different by making that request. But if you don't make that request happen, you would not see more diving in, I would say, more deeply.
A person was in public school for high school and they were unaware that they would leave out words in written papers. Is that a regular issue for ADHD or having a learning disability?
Definitely can happen with dysgraphia. So, and my college students, this happens to when I see writing issues, they may leave words out. And so they think they wrote them, but they didn't write it. And so when I read it, of course, I'm going to read it as face value of what it was. So what I tell my students at the college level is that I use, speech software. So I have things read back to me. All computers have that now. So when you have your accessibility feature turned on to have things read back to you, you can hear how they sound exactly how it was written. And then you can see what you missed. Because if you use Microsoft Word, for example, it's not going to see that you missed a word because it was spelled correctly. Now, Grammarly might. I do like Grammarly, although University in Northern Iowa does not support Grammarly because they think it's not secure enough. But I think Grammarly catches more of that. But my suggestion, which I do myself, is that when I'm going to have a piece of writing go out for a really important type of paper, I have it read back to me out loud.
Maybe you can name the steps on when a parent would like to request an IEP.
Well, first of all, you should talk to your classroom teacher. So you'd go to your general education teacher and be able to talk over the concerns you have and then request that. And the general education teacher would then put you in contact with the right people to start that process happening. So in Iowa, we have area education agencies. They do a great job for our state. And each of our designated, I don't know how many we have now. I know they've consolidated because of funding issues, but they would supply the people that do the testing. So they have the psychologist and the speech and language and the occupational therapists and consultants that would do the testing for the school. So you would have your representative from your school that would be able to do the testing and meet with you. And then you can always make sure that's in writing what you do as well.
Another question is what to do when, I know this happens as kids get older, middle school, high school, when they're resistant to help from teachers or maybe don't want to do the things that are in their plan?
Well, first of all, it starts with their relationships. So they have to feel close with their teachers and they have to feel like their teacher cares about them. So it goes back to that first thing I said. So making sure that, you see them as an individual, not just an individual with a disability, but you see everything that they like and as from a standpoint of all that outside supports for that child. So it starts there. They have to feel cared about. And they have to feel listened to. So they should be at the table, giving their input as well and understanding that. I'm thinking back to a boy who was fourth grade and he had attention issues, but he didn't think he did have any attention issues. So when we talk about it at the meetings, he would just, deny it. And that didn't happen. For example, like getting up in the middle of class. He got up in the middle of class like 5 times. He swore that he had never got up during class. So I actually had put in a video camera in the classroom and then we watched it. And we talked about that this did happen and what causes came out of that. And so by him, seeing that, we could talk through it and what needed to happen. But also I'd say it's that idea of trying to make learning fun from the outside standpoint. But it does come along with consequences. So you do have to see the consequences of life of what happens. You do this and then this happens. And how can I help you navigate that so you can get what you want and we can all be happy.
How can you help a child that's dealing with low confidence or may be bullied?
Okay, I'm going to take it from the parent and the teacher standpoint in that you're always talking about what they're good at. So you are looking at those strengths and you're being able to verbalize it very specifically, not just good job. Wow, you really worked hard on that. Wow, you really stuck with that. Look how that turned out. Looking at that growth mindset with the child and being able to recognize those strengths and doing that on a regular basis. Now, of course, kids with attention deficit and kids just in general are supposed to have 5 positives to every negative. So what I would do as a teacher, and you could do this as a parent, you should do this as a parent. That 4-year-old I was talking about, they've gotten into the whole rut of just negative, 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 negative. And so I would take chips and I would start out with 5 chips. And I put them in my pocket. And then if I said something negative, I moved the chip over to my other pocket. So I knew that I had said something negative. But I could then move that chip back to the other pocket when it's a positive. It just raising your level of awareness of that perspective. And I also put in there, I don't think I shared that, but maybe it's later on. I have a book called All Dogs Have ADHD. Just seeing that, with attention issues, you might have, problems, pay attention, but wow, you can multitask. It's a really positive thing. You can do a lot of things at one time. So looking at those strengths and then again, using those interests. So I was just telling you about the gentleman that stopped at my house today that had a lot of negative things going for him. But he could always go fishing and relax and bow and arrow hunting and still does that today and feels really great about that. He knows that he's really good at that. And of course, when you get old enough, you can choose a profession that will match your talents and your gifts and talents better as well.
So a child has an IEP for other health impairment due to ADHD, but you suspect there could be other learning disabilities happening affecting their ability to perform within language arts. And the school's not eager to provide other support since they're reading at grade level.
That is an issue in Iowa. You have to be below grade level, to be able to get those supports. That's a big difference from like when I was early on in my career. You could still get those supports, but now they do have to show a deficit. So you would have to, ask specifically, let's just say reading comprehension. Maybe they're reading in that FAST test, the correct words per minute, but their comprehension isn't there, that you can ask for more, evidence or testing on actual reading comprehension or the specific area that you're concerned about and be able to have them test in that specific area. So there's definitely, many things included in reading or writing or math, and you want to be specific with what that need is and the need that you're seeing.
A child has ADHD. How would a parent know what to look for if they have a learning disability, since there is so much overlap with symptoms?
I would say go back to the slides I talked about to see what, signs you saw for dyslexia, for dysgraphia, for dyscalculia, and then look specifically at those areas. So let's just take number sense in math. So you see your child doesn't understand what 72 means, okay? That's probably more of a learning disability rather than an attention deficit. Or I'm thinking about writing. Okay, so my great nephew has an attention deficit, but learning was not an issue. I mean, he was able to mask that until like 3rd grade because he did learn quickly and, things came pretty easily to him. But writing was the huge issue that when it came to writing, he just, could not focus and attend to that time period to be able to do that. But I think it is going back to the slides I showed, look at those characteristics and see if they have some of the areas that I showed.